Maya Johnson stepped through the glass doors of Precision Point Shooting Range, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished concrete floor. The familiar scent of gun oil and spent powder filled her nostrils, but everything else about this place felt foreign. Unlike the cramped community center range where she'd learned to shoot, this facility gleamed with state-of-the-art equipment and pristine lanes stretching into the distance. Chrome fixtures caught the fluorescent light, and digital displays showed real-time scoring that seemed almost futuristic compared to the hand-marked paper targets she was used to. The conversations around her died to murmurs as she approached the front counter. She caught fragments of whispered comments. Never seen her before. Doesn't look like she belongs here. Probably just curious. Maya had grown accustomed to being the only black face in spaces like this, but it never got easier. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. Let your shooting do the talking, baby girl. He'd taught her everything he knew about marksmanship, skills honed during his time in the military and refined through decades of hunting to feed his family. The range officer, a middle-aged white man with salt and pepper hair, looked her up and down skeptically. First time here, he asked, his tone suggesting he expected her to turn around and leave. Maya simply nodded, sliding her identification and range certification across the counter. She'd driven 3 hours from her small hometown, using money she'd saved from her job at the local diner, all for this moment. The regional championship qualifiers were next month, and she needed to practice on equipment similar to what she'd face in competition. As she filled out the paperwork, Maya noticed the wall of fame displaying range records. The current women's precision shooting record belonged to Jennifer Walsh, a name she recognized from national competitions. The photo showed a blonde woman in expensive gear, holding a trophy almost as tall as she was. Maya studied the score, 597 out of 600. Impressive, but not impossible. She'd shot 595 in practice last month, though nobody here would believe that. The skeptical glances followed her as she carried her modest equipment bag to lane 15. Her rifle case was battered leather, held together with duct tape in 2 places, a stark contrast to the sleek carbon fiber cases around her. But inside that weathered case lay her grandfather's custom rifle, a weapon he'd built by hand and she'd learned to maintain with the devotion others reserved for religion. Today would be her first step toward proving that excellence wasn't determined by appearance or equipment, but by skill, dedication, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're capable of achieving. Maya unzipped her grandfather's rifle case with reverence, revealing the custom-built weapon that had been her constant companion for the past decade. The stock was walnut, worn smooth by countless hours of practice, and the metal components showed the patina that comes only with age and care. Around her, she heard subtle scoffs and dismissive comments. "Look at that antique," someone whispered. Probably her daddy's old hunting rifle. The assumption stung, but she'd learned long ago that proving people wrong was more satisfying than arguing with them. She began her pre-shooting routine, methodically checking every component of her rifle. This ritual had been drilled into her since she was 12 years old, when her grandfather first placed the weapon in her small hands. "Respect the tool, and it will serve you faithfully," he'd always said. Maya cleaned the barrel with practiced efficiency, checked the scope mounts, and verified her ammunition. Her movements were fluid and confident, betraying none of the nervousness she felt being surrounded by skeptical stares. The range officer approached her lane, clipboard in hand. "You sure you know how to handle that thing safely?" His question was loaded with assumption, and Maya recognized the tone, the same one teachers had used when they doubted her academic abilities, the same one employers used when she walked into interviews. She nodded calmly and demonstrated proper handling procedures, showing him her certifications and explaining her safety protocols. His surprise was barely concealed when she recited range rules with precision and displayed knowledge that clearly exceeded his expectations. As she settled into her shooting position, Maya felt the familiar calm that always preceded her best performances. The external noise, both literal and figurative, began to fade. Her breathing slowed and deepened, her heartbeat became a steady rhythm she could feel in her temples, and the world narrowed to the circular perfection of the target 100 yards away. This was her sanctuary, the place where doubt couldn't follow, where prejudice held no power. She fired her first shot, and the electronic scoring system immediately displayed the result, a perfect 10 in the X-ring. The sound of conversations around her diminished noticeably. Her second shot joined the first, creating a tight cluster that would make any marksman proud. By her fifth shot, the whispers had stopped entirely, replaced by the kind of focused attention that serious shooters give to exceptional performance. Maya allowed herself a small smile. She was no longer the outsider with the questionable equipment. She was a competitor demanding respect through pure skill. The transformation in the atmosphere was palpable. Range officers began to gather behind her position, watching intently as each shot found its mark with mechanical precision. Other shooters paused their own practice to observe this unexpected display of mastery. Maya felt their eyes on her, but now the attention carried a different weight. Not skepticism, but grudging recognition that they were witnessing something special from someone they had vastly underestimated. Word of Maya's shooting spread through the range like wildfire. By her third visit, a small crowd had gathered to watch her practice sessions. The skepticism remained, but it was now mixed with curiosity and, among some of the better shooters, a growing concern about the implications of her presence. Jennifer Walsh, the current range record holder, arrived on Maya's fourth visit with an entourage that included her coach, sponsor representatives, and several local shooting enthusiasts who treated her like royalty. Jennifer was everything Maya wasn't: polished, well-funded, and connected to the sports establishment. Her equipment was cutting-edge, her shooting jacket bore logos from multiple sponsors, and her confidence seemed unshakable. She commanded respect through accomplishment, but also through her position within the sports hierarchy. When she learned about Maya's consistently high scores, her reaction was swift and pointed. "Anyone can get lucky for a few shots," she announced loud enough for Maya to hear. "Real champions perform under pressure, in competition, when it matters." The challenge was implicit but unmistakable. Several range regulars began placing informal bets on whether Maya could maintain her performance under scrutiny. Some defended her skill, having witnessed her consistency over multiple sessions, while others maintained that tournament shooting was entirely different from practice. The pressure was mounting, and Maya felt it settling on her shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome weight. She'd faced doubt before, but never with stakes this high or an audience this invested in seeing her succeed or fail. Maya's response was characteristically quiet but determined. She continued her practice routine without deviation, arriving at the same time each day, following the same preparation rituals, and maintaining the same focused intensity that had first caught everyone's attention. But privately, she began pushing herself harder. Her practice sessions extended longer, her standards became even more exacting, and she started researching tournament protocols and competitive shooting strategies. If they wanted to see her perform under pressure, she would be ready. The tension came to a head when Jennifer directly confronted Maya at the range counter. "I hear you think you're good enough to break records," she said, her tone carrying just enough condescension to make her intent clear. Maya looked up from signing in, meeting Jennifer's gaze steadily. "I don't think anything," she replied evenly. "I just shoot." The simplicity of her response seemed to irritate Jennifer further. "Well, shooting under pressure is different. Maybe you should try it sometime before making claims." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe I will." The conversation was overheard by several people, and within hours, the idea of a formal challenge had taken shape. The range owner, sensing both drama and potential publicity, offered to host a special event, a head-to-head competition between the established champion and the mysterious newcomer. The news spread through local shooting communities and social media, drawing attention from regional sports journalists and creating buzz that neither Maya nor the range had anticipated. What had started as simple practice sessions had evolved into something much larger, a symbolic confrontation that seemed to represent more than just marksmanship skills. Maya threw herself into preparation with an intensity that surprised even her. She studied videos of championship competitions, analyzing not just the technical aspects, but the psychological dynamics of high-pressure shooting. She learned about the mental games competitors played, the strategies for managing stress, and the tiny details that separated good shooters from great ones. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot, but competitive shooting required skills he never needed in the woods or on the military range. Her financial situation made professional coaching impossible, so Maya improvised. She reached out to former competitors through online forums, watched instructional videos until her eyes burned, and practiced visualization techniques she found in sports psychology books from the library. Every spare moment was devoted to improvement. She worked double shifts at the diner to afford additional range time and ammunition, her tips jar labeled Competition Fund, serving as a constant reminder of her goal. The physical preparation was only half the battle. Maya had to confront the psychological pressure of competing against someone with Jennifer's reputation and resources. She practiced shooting with distractions, asking friends to create noise and movement while she fired. She worked on maintaining her breathing and heart rate under stress, using techniques borrowed from meditation and anxiety management. Most importantly, she practiced ignoring the opinions and expectations of others, a skill that proved more difficult than any technical aspect of marksmanship. Her equipment became a particular focus of preparation. Maya couldn't afford new gear, but she could optimize what she had. She spent hours fine-tuning her grandfather's rifle, adjusting the trigger pull by fractions of ounces, and perfecting the scope alignment. She tested different types of ammunition, seeking the combination that produced the tightest groups with her specific rifle. Each component was cleaned, checked, and rechecked until she could disassemble and reassemble her weapon blindfolded. The emotional preparation proved most challenging. Maya faced the reality that she would be representing more than just herself in this competition. Whether she wanted it or not, she'd become a symbol, the outsider challenging the establishment, the unexpected competitor disrupting assumptions about who belonged in this space. The weight of that representation was both motivating and terrifying. She thought about her grandfather, who had faced similar challenges in his military service, and drew strength from his example of quiet determination in the face of doubt. As the competition date approached, Maya's practice scores remained consistently excellent, but she knew that practice and competition were different animals entirely. The pressure, the audience, the stakes, everything would be amplified beyond anything she'd experienced. She tried to prepare for every possible scenario, from equipment failures to psychological warfare from Jennifer's supporters. But deep down, she knew that all the preparation in the world couldn't fully simulate the moment when she would step up to the line with everyone watching, ready to prove whether she belonged among the sport's elite or was simply another pretender whose 15 minutes of fame were about to expire in spectacular fashion. Competition day dawned gray and drizzle-heavy, matching Maya's mood as she drove through the early morning darkness to Precision Point. She'd barely slept, her mind cycling between confidence and doubt, replaying every possible scenario from triumph to humiliating failure. Her grandfather's rifle lay in its familiar case beside her, but even its reassuring presence couldn't fully calm her nerves. This was different from practice. Today, everything she'd worked for would be validated or destroyed in front of an audience that seemed more interested in spectacle than sport. The parking lot was fuller than she'd ever seen it, with cars bearing license plates from 3 different states. News vans from local television stations had claimed spots near the entrance, their satellite dishes and camera equipment making the simple shooting range look like the site of a major news event. Maya sat in her car for several minutes, watching people stream into the building, trying to identify supporters from skeptics based on their expressions and body language. The racial dynamics were impossible to ignore. She saw very few faces that looked like hers among the crowd. Inside, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. The range had been transformed for the event, with spectator areas marked off and additional lighting installed to accommodate cameras. Maya noticed several people she recognized from online shooting forums, some local sports journalists, and what appeared to be officials from regional shooting organizations. The attention was overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus on her pre-competition routine. She signed in, verified her equipment with range officials, and began her methodical preparation process. Jennifer arrived 30 minutes later with a fanfare that contrasted sharply with Maya's quiet entrance. She was accompanied by her coach, several sponsors' representatives, and a small crowd of supporters wearing T-shirts with her name. The media immediately gravitated toward Jennifer, cameras capturing her confident smile and quotable soundbites about defending her record against emerging talent. Maya watched from a distance, noting how comfortable Jennifer appeared with the attention, how effortlessly she commanded the room's energy. This was Jennifer's world, and Maya was just visiting. The format had been agreed upon weeks earlier. Each shooter would fire 50 rounds at varying distances, with scores cumulative across multiple stages. The competition would begin with precision shooting at 100 yards, progress to rapid-fire sequences at 75 yards, and conclude with a pressure round where each shooter would fire 5 shots while being timed. The total possible score was 500 points, and Jennifer's range record stood at 487, a score that had seemed unbeatable until Maya began her mysterious practice sessions. As the competition began, Maya felt the familiar calm descending over her despite the chaos surrounding the event. The crowd noise faded, the camera flashes became irrelevant, and the skeptical stares lost their power to intimidate. She was no longer the outsider trying to prove she belonged. She was a competitor with a rifle in her hands, a target in her sights, and skills honed through years of dedicated practice. When the range officer called her name to take her position, Maya walked to the firing line with the steady confidence of someone who had already won the only competition that truly mattered, the battle against her own doubt. The first stage began with precision shooting at 100 yards, the distance where Maya felt most comfortable and confident. As she settled into her shooting position, the crowd noise faded to a distant hum, replaced by the steady rhythm of her heartbeat and controlled breathing. Her grandfather's rifle felt perfectly balanced in her hands, an extension of her body rather than a separate tool. The scope's crosshairs aligned with mechanical precision on the target center, and Maya began the mental countdown that preceded each shot. Her first round struck the 10 ring slightly left of center, a solid start but not the perfection she'd achieved in practice. The electronic scoring system immediately displayed the result, and she heard murmurs from the crowd behind her. Maya blocked out the noise and focused on her follow-through, making minute adjustments to her position and breathing pattern. Her second shot found the X-ring, earning appreciative comments from knowledgeable observers. By her fifth shot, she had established a tight cluster that had the range officers nodding with approval. Jennifer took her turn with characteristic confidence, her expensive equipment gleaming under the enhanced lighting. Her shooting stance was textbook perfect, refined through years of professional coaching and international competition. Her first 5 shots created an impressive group that slightly edged Maya's performance, earning enthusiastic applause from her supporters. The early score showed Jennifer ahead by 2 points, a narrow margin that could easily shift with subsequent rounds. The psychological warfare began during the brief break between stages. Jennifer's coach made pointed comments about maintaining consistency under pressure and the difference between practice and performance, words clearly intended for Maya to hear. Some spectators discussed the technical aspects of both shooters' equipment, with several expressing doubt about Maya's ability to compete with professional-grade gear. Maya overheard these conversations, but forced herself to remain focused on her own preparation routine. The rapid-fire stage proved more challenging for both competitors. This portion required shooters to engage multiple targets within strict time limits, testing not just accuracy, but speed and target acquisition skills. Maya had practiced this extensively, but never with an audience analyzing her every movement. Her first sequence was clean but conservative, prioritizing accuracy over speed. Jennifer's approach was more aggressive, attempting to maximize points through faster target transitions. The crowd's energy was building with each stage, their invested attention adding pressure that neither shooter had experienced before. As they progressed through the competition stages, a pattern emerged. Maya's shooting was consistently excellent, but lacked the flamboyant confidence that characterized Jennifer's performance. Jennifer played to the crowd, acknowledging their support and projecting the easy assurance of someone accustomed to winning. Maya remained internally focused, her intensity almost meditative in contrast to Jennifer's dynamic presence. The score remained close throughout the middle stages, with lead changes occurring after nearly every round. By the time they reached the final pressure stage, Jennifer held a 3-point advantage, significant but not insurmountable. The tension was palpable as both shooters prepared for the 5 shots that would determine not just the competition outcome, but Maya's future in competitive shooting and Jennifer's claim to dominance in her domain. The final stage arrived with the weight of accumulated tension pressing down on both competitors. 5 shots, timed sequences, with the crowd fully invested in the outcome and cameras capturing every micro-expression. Maya felt the pressure differently than she'd anticipated, not as crushing weight, but as clarifying focus. The noise, the stares, the doubt, and the expectations all crystallized into a single point of concentration, the target waiting 100 yards away. Jennifer shot first, her confident stride to the firing line accompanied by encouraging calls from her supporters. The timer started, and she fired her sequence with mechanical precision, each shot following the last with rhythmic consistency. Her grouping was excellent, earning a score that extended her lead to 5 points. The crowd erupted in appreciation, sensing that the home favorite was pulling away from the challenger. Jennifer's smile was radiant as she stepped back from the line, her body language projecting confidence that the competition was effectively over. Maya approached the firing line amid a notably quieter atmosphere. Her supporters were fewer and less vocal, but she felt their presence nonetheless. As she settled into position, she thought about her grandfather's teachings about pressure and performance. "The target don't care about anything but where your bullet hits," he'd always said. "Everything else is just noise." The timer operator looked at her expectantly, his finger poised over the start button. Maya nodded her readiness, and the final sequence of her most important competition began. Her first shot struck the X-ring with authoritative precision, earning surprised murmurs from the crowd. The second shot joined it in a tight cluster that had range officials leaning forward to better observe her target. With each subsequent shot, the atmosphere in the range shifted perceptibly. The crowd noise decreased as people realized they were witnessing something exceptional. Maya's grouping was not just accurate, it was approaching perfection under the most demanding circumstances possible. The fourth shot created a cluster so tight that the electronic scoring system took extra seconds to process the result. When the score appeared, showing another perfect 10, the crowd fell nearly silent. Maya's heart rate remained steady, her breathing controlled, and her focus absolute. The mathematical possibilities were running through everyone's mind. If her final shot matched the first 4, she would not only win the competition but shatter Jennifer's range record by a significant margin. The pressure of that moment would have been overwhelming for most shooters, but Maya felt an unexpected sense of peace. This was why she'd driven 3 hours to practice at this range, why she'd worked double shifts to afford competition ammunition, why she'd endured skeptical stares and dismissive comments. This single shot represented the culmination of years of preparation and a lifetime of proving herself in spaces where she wasn't expected to succeed. As she aligned her sights for the final time, Maya realized that regardless of the outcome, she had already achieved something important. She had earned her place among serious competitors through skill alone. The shot, when it came, felt inevitable rather than pressured, the natural conclusion of a conversation between shooter, rifle, and target that had begun long before this competition started. The final shot left Maya's rifle with the same controlled precision that had characterized her entire performance, but this time the silence in the range was absolute. Even the electronic scoring system seemed to pause longer than usual, as if the technology itself was processing the significance of what had just occurred. When the score finally appeared, a perfect 10 in the X-ring, the number that followed changed everything. Maya had not only won the competition decisively, but her total score of 494 had obliterated Jennifer's range record by 7 points. The silence lasted only seconds before erupting into chaos. Some spectators cheered appreciatively, recognizing exceptional marksmanship regardless of their initial loyalties. Others seemed stunned, unable to process that their assumptions about the outcome had been so thoroughly shattered. The range officials huddled around the electronic scoring system, double-checking calculations and verifying equipment calibration, though everyone knew the results were accurate. Maya herself remained at the firing line for several moments, staring at her target as if confirming that the tight cluster of holes was real and not some stress-induced hallucination. Jennifer's reaction was a study in competitive psychology. Her initial shock gave way to professional graciousness, but Maya could see the struggle behind her congratulatory words. This wasn't just a loss. It was a fundamental disruption of the established order in a sport where Jennifer had reigned supreme. Her sponsors and supporters seemed equally bewildered, their confident predictions having been proven spectacularly wrong by someone they dismissed as an unlikely challenger with questionable credentials. The media coverage was immediate and intense. Cameras that had focused primarily on Jennifer throughout the competition now swarmed around Maya, seeking quotes and reactions from the woman who had just achieved the seemingly impossible. Maya's responses were characteristically modest, deflecting credit to her grandfather's teaching and emphasizing respect for all competitors. But privately, she felt a satisfaction deeper than any she'd experienced before, the validation of years spent proving herself in spaces where she was unwelcome. Word of the record-breaking performance spread rapidly through social media and shooting sports networks. Maya's phone, which she'd silenced during competition, buzzed continuously with calls from reporters, potential sponsors, and shooting organizations. The local news stations that had covered the event as a human interest story suddenly found themselves with genuine sports news of regional significance. The narrative had shifted from local challenger tests establishment to unknown shooter breaks major record. As the crowd began to disperse and equipment was packed away, Maya found herself alone with her grandfather's rifle for the first time since arriving that morning. The battered case that had drawn scoffs and dismissive comments now seemed to glow with vindicated pride. She cleaned and secured the weapon with the same reverence she'd shown every day since inheriting it, but now the routine carried additional meaning. The rifle had not only performed flawlessly under pressure, it had helped rewrite the record books and challenge fundamental assumptions about who belonged in competitive shooting. Maya smiled as she closed the case, imagining her grandfather's reaction to the day's events and knowing that somewhere, somehow, he was proud of what his baby girl had accomplished with the tools and wisdom he'd provided. The days following Maya's record-breaking performance transformed her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her phone rang constantly with interview requests from sports journalists, shooting magazines, and television programs seeking to understand how an unknown competitor had emerged from nowhere to dominate an established sport. The story had captured public imagination beyond the shooting community, resonating with anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed based on appearance rather than ability. The response from the shooting sports establishment was complex and revealing. Progressive voices within the community celebrated Maya's achievement as evidence of the sport's diversity and merit-based competition. They pointed to her performance as proof that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources and that assumptions about who belonged in competitive shooting needed serious revision. However, other voices raised questions about her background, training, and the circumstances of her record-setting performance, suggesting that her success was somehow less legitimate than traditional pathways to competitive excellence. Sponsorship offers began arriving within days of the competition. Equipment manufacturers who had never heard Maya's name suddenly saw marketing opportunities in her story. However, Maya approached these offers cautiously, remembering her grandfather's warnings about accepting help that came with hidden strings attached. She consulted with a sports attorney recommended by a supportive forum member, determined to maintain control over her competitive career and public image while navigating the commercial aspects of competitive shooting. The regional and national shooting organizations took notice of Maya's performance with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some officials expressed excitement about her potential contributions to the sport and began discussing opportunities for advancement to higher-level competitions. Others seemed more concerned about maintaining established protocols and ensuring that her rapid rise didn't disrupt traditional developmental pathways. Maya found herself navigating political dynamics she'd never encountered, learning that exceptional performance was just the beginning of establishing a sustainable competitive career. The personal impact was equally significant. Maya's success brought attention to her small hometown and the community center where she'd learned to shoot. The local newspaper ran a feature story about her journey, and the diner where she worked became a gathering place for people wanting to discuss her achievement. Her co-workers expressed pride in her success, though some seemed surprised that the quiet woman who served their coffee had harbored such exceptional abilities. The attention was flattering but overwhelming for someone accustomed to anonymity. Most meaningfully, Maya began receiving messages from young people, particularly young women and minorities, who saw her story as inspiration for their own pursuits. Parents shared photos of daughters who had started asking about shooting sports, and coaches reported increased interest in their programs following media coverage of Maya's achievement. She realized that her individual success had become something larger, a symbol of possibility for people who might never have considered themselves capable of excellence in traditionally exclusive spaces. The responsibility was humbling, but it also provided new motivation for continued excellence in competition and mentorship for others following similar paths. 6 months after shattering the range record, Maya stood at the entrance of the National Shooting Sports Center, her grandfather's rifle case in hand and credentials identifying her as a qualifier for the national championship. The journey from small-town diner waitress to nationally recognized competitor had been surreal, filled with challenges she'd never anticipated and opportunities that exceeded her wildest expectations. The scared, doubted woman who had walked into Precision Point that first day had evolved into a confident athlete ready to compete against the best shooters in the country. Her training had evolved significantly with her new status and resources. While remaining loyal to her grandfather's rifle and core techniques, Maya had incorporated professional coaching, sports psychology, and advanced technical analysis into her preparation. She'd learned to balance respect for traditional methods with openness to innovation, understanding that excellence required both foundational skills and continuous improvement. Her scores in regional competitions had remained consistently high, validating her initial breakthrough as sustainable performance rather than beginner's luck. The shooting sports community had gradually embraced Maya's presence, though pockets of resistance remained. She'd encountered competitors who questioned her credentials and officials who seemed to scrutinize her performance more closely than others. But she'd also found mentors, allies, and fellow competitors who valued skill over assumptions and welcomed diversity within their sport. Maya had learned to navigate these dynamics with grace, focusing on her performance while using her platform to encourage inclusion and challenge stereotypes. Her relationship with Jennifer Walsh had evolved into mutual respect, if not friendship. Jennifer had struggled initially with being displaced from her position of dominance, but had eventually acknowledged Maya's legitimate excellence and adapted her own training in response to new competition. Their rivalry had elevated both shooters' performances and generated increased interest in women's competitive shooting. Maya appreciated Jennifer's eventual graciousness and the way their competition had pushed both athletes to new levels of achievement. The national championship represented both a culmination and a beginning. Maya understood that her breakthrough at Precision Point had been just the first step in a longer journey towards sustained excellence at the highest levels of competition. She carried her grandfather's lessons about patience, preparation, and perseverance, but she also brought new confidence earned through proven performance under pressure. The targets at nationals would be no different from those she'd conquered before. The challenge was maintaining her focus amid even greater stakes and expectations. As she walked toward the competition venue, Maya reflected on the broader significance of her journey. She had proven that excellence could emerge from unexpected places, that traditional barriers could be overcome through skill and determination, and that sports could serve as powerful vehicles for challenging assumptions about ability and belonging. Win or lose in the upcoming competition, she had already achieved something important. She had claimed her place among elite competitors and opened doors for others who might follow similar paths. The woman who had once been doubted because of her appearance and background was now preparing to compete for a national championship, carrying her grandfather's rifle and his legacy of quiet excellence into whatever challenges lay ahead. In the world of competitive shooting, records are made to be broken. But some achievements transcend mere numbers, becoming symbols of possibility that inspire others to pursue their own excellence despite doubt, skepticism, and barriers. Maya Johnson's journey from dismissed outsider to record-holding champion reminds us that true skill recognizes no boundaries except those we impose upon ourselves.